So it's like when Jane Austen is writing, one, she is writing actually against a lot of this stuff. Northanger Abbey with it against the Gothic romance that were popular in the late 18th century. She is inventing a virtue that hadn't been there, much as we could say Adam Sandler is trying to do. And the ones you like are actually the ones that are trying to invent virtuous stories out of a morass of sin and philosophical self-justification for their adulteries in the pride. So maybe this is consoling. It's not new. Again.
So I'd like to rephrase this romantically. What you're saying is I like people that are trying to transcend the sluts and whores of their particular generation to create something beautiful. Okay. Yeah.
But it does leave us. So here we have Doris Day, and I think this is the different one. It's still, that is Rock Hudson, isn't it? She's lying on this is another one where they revise the same sort of problem and pillow talk, but he has to pretend to be like too embarrassed to have sex, this character. And so he's going to seduce her. He tries seducing her by, saying, I'm so ashamed, I can't do it. And so she talks herself into believing that, she's going to give up her virtue to help him gain his self-confidence.
I would have if I was in charge of the code, I would have banned that movie. I would have demanded a different outcome at the end.
But okay, but this is the Doris Day and Rock Hudson were apparently good friends. I didn't read up all of the gossip stuff about how, I think they were just like friends, right? So that's fine. But that the sort of quintessential version of the American romance of the mid-20th century, Doris Day's America's Sweetheart, is the strong woman dealing with the awkward, confused or pretending to, he's catfishing her again, right? Confused man who she gets to, feel more knowledgeable than, or something like that. I did watch some French ones. They tend to go a different direction.
Damaging tradition of men getting free affection and free respect. If she was willing to give him her virtue so that he would increase his confidence.
Yep.
He's earned nothing. That's the ultimate freebie.
Yes, and she's in this beautiful little bubbly dress. It's like glittery and everything, and she's talking herself. They do end up, I think at the end of that one, she's pregnant and they get married and stuff like that. But in this scene, she's talking herself into it being virtuous to help him get over his shyness about his sexuality. But just saying what American women in the mid-50s were too scared of, strong masculine men. This could have been made yesterday. Allegedly.
Yeah.
Apparently American women have been afraid of strong, what happened to John Wayne characters? And of course, Clint Eastwood characters are always, they're off, straying back off into the sunset or something. So I'm not sure. But it's interesting how much the myth of the period that we have, that we're supposed to be not wanting or wanting, doesn't exist even in the movies that are apparently supposed to be the carriers of that myth.
I'm wondering why this was the ideal, or this was the status quo, if it was. Why they were scared of having men in the lead, like truly in the lead.
Right. Well, they're clear. So they're making these movies to get women to watch them, presumably, right? These are the romantic comedies, so you're going to get the female audience, and they have this sense that having Doris Day playing these, athletic, and she's very slender and beautiful, and I get their stunt doubles in the circus one, but that it's or I wasn't watching like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, but their dances and there's elegance and there's such like that. But the women in all of these American movies are all assertive and self-confident, and the men are there to be like sidekicks for their self-confidence almost.
Yeah, they're side characters.
This is I've switched now. Here's another of the Doris Day. This is Doris Day with her counterpart in the Pajama Game movie, where, you know, she's going to have to stand up for the union no matter how much he says he loves her. And of course, the drama of it is that she is, in fact, going to stand up for the workers' rights as opposed to recognizing that he needs, you know, he as the manager also has to stand up for the thing that he's supposed to stand up for. And so they split up and then get back together. But the splitting up has to be over her, you know, needing to be the complaint manager for the union, which is, I mean, it's garment work, so a lot of women are in it. But
so is this the American empire needing to fictionalize and get American women to identify with the workplace as their husband, as the primary like masculine authority in their lives is the workplace?
It seems to be over. I mean, so Silent Draco is saying, ask the writers who are not strong, confident men. Casey, 1950s Hollywood seemed to work hard at convincing women to take the lead sexually and in business. They sure did. I mean, way more than I had expected in making this little journey. Silent Draco saying Tate might suicide after reading it, feeling his own inadequacy. Well, but he'd, you know, be philosophical about it by the end of reading Casanova. Casey saying this is the decade the feminine mystique was published. But you know, sort of the claim of the feminine mystique is that everybody's stuck in the suburbs, which of course Frieden wasn't. But that it's, you know, it's hardly Frieden on her own that's creating this image. I mean, all these movies are set very typically in New York, so, you know, they get the glamour of the big city. I mean, even the Pajama Game is really set in a New York factory, I think. So
it is the empire. It's like Empire State vision of American life. It's New York, you know. It's not the rural South.
Well, so I guess I was consciously not watching Westerns, which I'm more familiar with. And I would say maybe the sexual relations of the Westerns, perhaps it's where it lives, right? The sort of fantasy version of the strong man who can either fight off the Indians or fight off the bad guys. The South as such, things like the hillbilly South. I mean, there's in the television culture, a series of those 1960s, I guess they're 50s, 60s, the things like Petticoat Junction and the Beverly Hillbillies, and there's a few others that, or maybe Andy I can't remember what his name is. The kid, the scene is they all start going off fishing. There is a sort of period when the television series will show the South kind of affectionately, but all of those shows are canceled about the same time in the early 70s. We're not really allowed to have in the United States a positive image of the South. But these movies that the sort of version of things that I was looking at, you know, they're all set in the city. They're all set in this professional high life. Not that aristocratic, right? Most of the characters are. I mean, one of the fun Christmas ones we watched over the not in this set when I was sick, but it happened on Fifth Avenue, which is a kind of sweet story about the hobo and he collects the people around him over Christmas living in the mansion. But it's another, you know, sort of I mean, there's a number of challenge to business movies, I guess, like The Pajama Game.
I find that really interesting. They weren't making stories about love independent from industrial relations of some description or the workplace of some description. Because to me, that means the culture, even at that time, was not creating stories about love independent of the money power, the influence of you know, professional life, and having a distinction between the family and the manager, you know, having a distinction between your family and your boss, this division between the private world of the family and the professional world that was supposed to exist in order to support and feed and provide for the family. everything happens in that world of work where women are not mothers because they don't have children in that world. You can't bring a child into that world. There are no children in an office. I find that very odd.
Well, as we're thinking about it, I'm thinking it's like in the TV land, you have things like the Dick Van Dyke Show, which had Mary Tyler Moore at home as the mother. The counterpart to the mermaid NASA movie that I watched, I think would be something like I Dream of Jeannie, where the astronaut finds Jeannie and she stays home and is a housewife, or Bewitched, right? Where, and that one being the premise being Samantha has to give up her. I mean, Darren's always wanting her to not to do the magic, and she's trying to be a good housewife by not doing the magic, but she always ends up using the magic. That's, her professional abilities are. So insofar as there is an image of domesticity, it's coming out, in fact, perhaps more in these television series than it is in the movies.
Yeah, like the Addams Family.
Or the Addams Family and the Munsters, right? Those are both late 60s. Those, I think they both run in the late 60s, around the same, and they run together, right? It's like the Addams Family is the aristocratic family, and the Munsters is the working family, and then people divide up over which one of the series they like better. But they ran for about the same amount of time, at about the same time. I mean, exactly like the same years.
Is it interesting though, because the women in those all four of those series, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, Munsters, and Addams Family, they're mythological characters. They're not real women.
Right.
You have to be a witch, a genie, a vampire, or a very committed goth in order to stay home with children. But not a regular normie female.
Well, maybe we say, okay, so we could keep adding images here of something like Lost in Space, where the whole family goes off in space. So it's the Family Robinson, or I thought of another one. Or like, so then I've done previous deep dives and sort of moments of relaxation and rest, and watching the Partridge Family from the early 70s, or the Brady Bunch. You realize the Brady Bunch, we mentioned that because they had the housekeeper, right, who was clearly modeled on all of these previous movie housekeepers, although Alice doesn't seem to be getting drunk most of the time. The Partridge Family, I found, is strikingly just as disturbing as all of these movies, because one, she's widowed, right? So it's a single mom, the Mrs. Partridge, a single mom taking care of the family. And many of the plots that they're in are, it's early 70s, so there's I can't remember if there's any war activism. One of the better ones is they go to Detroit and have to help the local black club earn some money so that they can stay open, because when they've been when Reuben has booked them, but Reuben is he's not a proper husband because he's just their agent, right? So he can't actually take care of the family in the man's role. He's booked them in a place where they can't perform unless they help the locals out, right? And recognizing that the 70s is doing that, the early 70s are doing that quite consciously in their scripting. The more I watch, the more I cannot find the time in which our American media has not been subversive of allegedly traditional culture, unless they're monsters, right? Unless, as you say, they're goths or vampires or witches or
well, it puts it in the realm of fairy tale then, doesn't it? I mean, it basically proposes that the only way that this can exist is in fairy tale and not in reality. Because in the real world, there is no patriarch at home. In the real world, there is no masculine central pillar of the family that is very much a part of the home life. It's only in fairy tale. You have to be you have to have a genie or a witch or a goth or a vampire. What does that do psychologically to an entire society? Never having a very strong masculine patriarch as a part of that home situation.